Okay, so anyway, let's okay. Okay, so officially good morning. Um, sorry it's a bit late. Sorry about that. Um, so this is our fourth, what is it? No, third, third module. And then the first two modules we went through Lama Yeshe's little book, like this little book, which was becoming your own therapist. And the intention behind this class, maybe to introduce, because some people maybe don't know, what is Lama Yeshe series? Why do a series on Lama Yeshe? So the Land and Medicine Buddha is part of a global organization called the Foundation for the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition, which is a long name for FPMT. And this organization was founded by Lama Thupten Yeshe in around 1975, which was when I went to Nepal and met him. And at that point, all that existed was a small monastery, Kopan Monastery. And Kopan was unique in the sense that it hosted, if you wanted to study Buddhism in those days, you had in English, and otherwise you had to learn Tibetan. You had two choices essentially, which was to study in Dharamsala, which is the where the Tibetan government in exile and His Holiness Dalai Lama settled. The Indian government gave them the area to settle, other areas too. And then if you wanted to study English, there was the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives had teachings starting because Westerners were traveling to the East, right, in that era, and were interested. In the other place you could study if you were wanted to study well in English was at Kopan Monastery with Lama Thupten Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who just from a interest from a bunch of hippies, traveling in the East and interested in spiritual things. And Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche spoke some English, very broken and kind of a unique dialect of their own. And so Lama Yeshe started. So Lama Yeshe and Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Lama Yeshe. We see Lama Yeshe there. I can't see behind me. Rinpoche is where? He's over there and somewhere behind me. Yeah. Um, and so they started teaching this 1 month meditation course. And it was very unique. It was unique in the sense that, well, it was unique because nothing much was being offered. And it was an intensive 1 month course. You couldn't leave the monastery grounds. Over the last 2 weeks, we would keep silence and eat one meal a day, taking precepts. There would be Lama Zopa Rinpoche did most of the teachings. And he would teach twice a day for anywhere from 2 to 3 hours, so 6 hours of teachings. And then you had about, I don't know, I can't remember, six, seven, 8 sessions of meditation led by a Westerner. And everything was, we didn't have printed, it was like, anybody remember Gestetner machines? Yeah. So you had to so you type out and it had like four carbon copies. And then, of course, and it would punch a hole for the letter, and then you put it on this ink thing, and you and you knock out all these copies of. I still have some, and so it was very organic. It was just like in the moment, and the focus of the meditation course was a particular text that's very dear to this tradition, which is called the Lam Rim, or the Graduated Path to Enlightenment. So it all started like that. And then people started inviting, instead of having to come to Nepal every year, they would start inviting the lamas to travel. And so some centers were started in Australia, the US, and Europe. And where was I going? So um, Lama Yeshe escaped Tibet in 1959 when the Chinese fully took over. And was a learned lama in those days. The whole education system, which was very robust and very established, was in the monasteries. And if you were to become, say, a PhD level of study, it would take you about 25 years. And it was just like our system of study, it was graduated and organized. So Lama Yeshe's was, and so that there's four traditions in Tibet, and so this tradition this follows is called the Gelug school, and so Lama Yeshe was when you would finish your 25 or however many years it took study, you could then sit for your exams and attain like a PhD in Buddhist studies, which is pretty much a understatement because it's far beyond that. Then you could attain your Geshe degree. In those days, only 18 monks were awarded a Geshe degree a year. And you might have, oh, I don't know, 100 trying to, so they'd have to wait to the next year and like that. It's very fascinating because uh, the exam would take place for over 3 days during the new year, and it would be you would be publicly examined. So, and then everyone would, thousands and thousands of Tibetans would come to watch this. So can you imagine? And then you're debating with the top geshes and the abbots of the big monasteries. They're all sitting on these big thrones, and you're like, what? I don't know how they weren't nervous. They must have been nervous. And then, along with His Holiness Dalai Lama, his tutors, and they could ask you any question from any text you studied in the 25 years, and you did not have the, and you didn't know what the question was, and you wouldn't have the text in front of you. So they would find some, obscure quote by the Buddha or great master, and then they would debate, well, how is that so? And you had to, so they actually memorize these texts, thousands of pages, literally. And they still do it in the monasteries. So, so Lam Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche didn't know each other in those early days, but they were both in refugee camps. And then this Kopan started and so on. So why we have a Lam Yeshe series is because Lam Yeshe had a very, very unique style of presenting these teachings, which are traditional, you know, sort of clothed in traditional language. If you try to read the text, these books, I mean, you can read them, but I mean, somehow Lama Yeshe's intent, I'd say his mission was that he felt that these teachings were universal. So when you read something like karma, you read something like reincarnation, or something like that's pretty scripturally or academically presented, we get very caught up in that because I think we tend to be approach new topics in sort of an academic way, an intellectual way. And so, and Tibetan Buddhism in general, Tibetan Buddhism is very, can be extremely academic, right? And you can get very caught up in, even in our organization, we have a master's program, we have a basic program, and we have different levels of program, which sort of mirror in a refined way what was presented traditionally in the Tibetan system. You can go through all of that in a sense, you could go through all of that in a very academic, intellectual way. And Lam Yeshe sort of protested that for what, particularly for foreigners. And if I say Westerners, it's because in the old days it was Western. Now we can just say foreigners. So the intent behind Lama's teachings always was that these are universal ideas. And he really was intent upon communicating. In fact, he often say when he's teaching, "Are we communicating? Are we communicating?" I would say that one of Lama's probably purposes, I would say, was to figure out how to communicate. And he didn't. No one really taught him much English, but then he somehow developed. I mean, he had a unique style of English and use of words. So the intent behind the Lama Yeshe series is to help share, to kind of make this bridge. We still need the traditional teachings, but sometimes within the context of traditional teachings, we lose the essence, we lose the meaning. Okay, so I felt that Lama Yeshe passed away in 1984. I was at Kopan from 1975 to 1988. So I was with him and when he became gravely ill and all that. And so I had an unbelievable great fortune of working and living under him or with him. And to in some ways it was almost, I mean, in a joking way, it was kind of like a curse. The reason is because he is very intense, like most of these lamas are. And the difference when we talk about Tibetan lamas or teachers, I want to make the distinction that we have a lot of Tibetan teachers. We have a lot of Western teachers now. What we're looking at here, though, is these ideas, all of them, and I would say that most of the Buddhist teachings are psychological, if not psychological, philosophical. But the intent is why. The intent is not for the intent is not to enrich our academic understanding, which is a lot of us engage in these teachings for that reason, because that's sort of our training, to acquire knowledge. And the knowledge in the Tibetan or in the Buddhist context is vast. You can never almost get all of the knowledge that's being presented. Um, so Lama was took a strong stance on confronting us modern people that you're you're just focused on academic or information collecting. And some brilliant people, they can tell you, they can read through the lists and memorize because we have lists galore, right? And and you can recite these things, and these Geshis can do that too. So it looks like the Geshis and the Western academics are kind of on par with, kind of in the same sort of category. The difference is, and many times that is true, but Lama didn't care at all about the acquiring the knowledge. He didn't, I shouldn't say at all. He wanted you to have enough knowledge so that when you could, his intent was to become a healthy human being over and over and over and over again. What his goal was, and the goal of Buddhism, is to become happier and happier. Yeah, and he used to talk about how so many of his students were miserable and getting more miserable. The more they studied, the more miserable they got. What is that? So that's missing some connection. I don't see that so much amongst Tibetans. They sort of, and I don't mean to glorify the Tibetan culture, but they somehow, maybe because it's their culture and they grew up with it, they get that these ideas are to be practiced. What's the purpose? So we go into these teachings and I don't know what our purpose usually is. What is our purpose? It's curiosity, right? Um, these days, I think it's also the idea that these teachings have something to offer our well-being. I think initially for a lot of people, it's kind of curiosity. We like new things. We like new ideas. They're provocative. So Lama was cautious about that. Myself, for example, uh, traditionally, if you look at how the tradition works, you study. I'm talking about in the Tibetan culture and Buddhist culture too. But you study and you meditate, you study and you practice, right? And um, you might do retreats, you might become a monk or a nun, right? To become more intensely engaged in the ideas. For the Tibetan people, or for the traditional Buddhists, I would say, and I'm generalizing, is that they understand that the idea of the Buddhist teachings is to become awakened, and the word Buddha means awakened one. And I tend to uh, regret that we started Tibetan or Buddhism in the West using Sanskrit words. I think it would be better if we'd started with the translation. I mean, when they translate all of these hundreds of volumes of text from Sanskrit and Pali to Tibet in the 8th century when it started, they made a whole new language for the Tibetans don't use the Sanskrit words. So the word Buddha, which is Sanskrit, they developed a word that defined it. So, but we didn't do that. We're doing it now. So in a sense, if we had been on track, it would have been something like a awakenism or something, or the path of awakening. Maybe that'd be. So Buddhism really means the path of awakening, the practice of awakening. And Buddha was an awakened one. So Um, Also because of our, probably because of our Judeo-Christian background, we tend to externalize. Like when we start hearing things like Buddha, right, and bodhisattvas and these deities and all this incredible abundance of symbols, we tend, it's easy to externalize all of that because even when we're brought up and we pray to God, I think generally think it's something outside of us. So the huge shift between Buddhist thought and other systems of thought and other religions is that in Buddhist context, it's up to you. You know, these qualities that we're talking about, all these deities, all this awakening, all this Buddha, all this compassion, all this love, all this path, it's all internal. It's all internal. So even to say I practice Buddhism might not be true because maybe my practice of Buddhism is completely external, right? I sit, I meditate, I do my 20 minutes, and then I recite some prayers and might do some prostrations and fill some water bowls. And I think I'm practicing Buddhism, right? And that's not the practice. You're practicing something. But what's meant, why do you do prostrations? In Buddhism, prostration is a very big thing. Or why do you circumambulate a stupa? To show respect. But see, it does show respect. Why? Why, how is that part of a path, though? Because everything in the Buddhist teachings, whether it's philosophical or psychological presentation, is to practice. It's not meant to just be known. Oh, that's interesting. I can recite the 10 richnesses and the 18, what are they? 10 and 8 endowments, and I can see the 12 links of dependent arising, or, you can just recite the four, all these. We have these lists galore. Is that just so? I mean, to show respect is good because that's a positive mental attitude, right? But if we think that everything the Buddha articulated was for the purpose of attaining awakening, and I think all of it was, sometimes it's a circuitous route, right? It's not necessarily direct. You first have to do this, and you first have to do that. You have to get all these things. But the intention is what differentiates. So the intention in in the Buddhist path, the intention is to attain awakening. So if you're going to circumambulate, that would make it a Buddhist practice, depending on your intention. Not that respect, and it's not that there's not positivity, positive things to do, right? But that doesn't make it necessarily part of a path. So when we think about the purpose of this path, and we talk about the Four Noble Truths, was the first thing the Buddha taught. He taught that the nature of our life is difficulty or suffering, problems, right? And he talked about the cause, and he talked about the path, and he talked about there's a result, freedom from that, which he called nirvana, liberation. So that's all an internal thing, it's all an internal thing. So we have so many teachings, but like even compassion, I would say, it's good to be compassionate towards somebody, of course, but the real compassion is that because we see that our own mind, I want to attain awakening, which is fully healthy, mentally, psychologically healthy state of being. So the awakened mind is something I need to attain. I can't attain it for you. You can't attain it for me. How much you pray that I'm healthy, or that our kids are, or our parents are, it doesn't make them healthy. Doesn't mean it's bad to do, but it's not what is the cause. I haven't even gone to one slide yet, have I? This is my introduction. Um, I think the context is so important. I don't want to have to do this next week. The context being that Lama Yeshe himself, who was, in my opinion, and spending time, and maybe it's just my romantic, idealistic mind. To me, he presented, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, like the Dalai Lama, like other highly realized teachers. The difference that I'm trying to share here is that we have psychotherapists, we have psychologists, we have doctors, we have this sort of thing, right? And the quickest way for us to become healthy, like when you're, I mean, I think that when you're, like if you're seeing a psychologist, doesn't it matter the quality of the psychologist, or is it just the psychologist or therapist's presentation, his or her model? Is that what matters? Like what gets you healthy? What helps when you're with a therapist? Actually, the research shows what helps the most is the relationship between the therapist and the client. It's not the model, which is very interesting. So I think sometimes we don't, as Buddhists, we don't really pay attention to that enough. Um, when you're with somebody who is healthy or awakened or healthy, like when we're with someone who's sort of happy and balanced, it affects us, right? And we might be struggling, but just being with that person is sort of therapeutic. So I think Lama's intent for us is become healthy and then you'll help people. It's not about charity. It's not about social justice. It's not about circumventing, a stupa. It is all those things if it's done with the right intention. Okay. And the right intention is all of this becomes a path. So Lama felt that everything could become the path. often tell when I teach these classes about how Lama scolded me for this. You don't even know how to make a cup of tea. What does that mean? Of course I knew how to make a cup of tea. What did he mean? Diane, you gave me this cup of tea. What did he mean? Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And the mindset that goes along with that. Because it's not just intention is number one. But then you have the opportunity to be, you know, who are you when who are you? Who's showing up to offer that cup of tea? Is it your confused, neurotic, nervous person who's trying to give Lama a cup of tea and you know he's going to criticize it, you know? And you're worried about, I mean, sometimes I couldn't even go into his room. I'd have a meeting with him, and I'd go and I'd stand outside his room for like 5 or 10 minutes. Just like, I can't go in there. I just know it's going to be brutal because he's in your face, right? Or in my case, he was just in, why? I mean, that's for me. Other people he was really nice to. Most people he was really nice to. I think that didn't work so well with me. So he was, anyway, let's see. I don't even know what I wrote down here. Hang on a second. Everybody. Okay. So this particular little book, it has 4 chapters, so we'll try to cover all 4. I usually don't do very good at that. The first one, your mind is your religion. Second, a Buddhist approach to mental illness. Everything comes from the mind, and make your mind an ocean. So I'm trying to see if I can cover some of this. Your mind is your religion. And what I think I was talking to my good friend John Landa, who was very close to Lam Yeshe, and we were talking about how to present this material because it's much easier when you have a list, of different topics. I mean, like breakdown and outlines, and with llamas, I can't do that. And John and I were talking. He said, I think the main thing is for people. Maybe I misheard him, but is for people to get a feeling of Lama's presence and the effect he had on people. Because when someone attains high levels of awakening, I don't know what level Lam Yeshe reached. We have levels. We don't talk about us and enlightenment. That's one of those misconceptions that spread through our culture. Satori, instant enlightenment, all those things. I don't buy it. We say it's a path. It's a process of awakening. There's a book, maybe someone knows, called Happier. Anyone know this book? I think that's the name of the book. Anyway, it was a study that was done. No, it was a class that was given at, I don't know, Harvard or Yale or somewhere, and this professor was interested in teaching a class on happiness, and there were 200 uh, seats available to attend this class, and 1,200 people showed up, and he taught it, and then he taught again. Each semester, hundreds of people would come for this class, and I was very curious because what he would define as happiness, and his definition of happiness was happier, a progression of becoming happier, and he didn't have an end goal, which was, I think, great, but that the happiness is a person who is progressively becoming happier. And I would say that's what the Buddhist path is. So it's not we're miserable and then we attain enlightenment. I don't think it works like that. Maybe it does. I might be wrong. If it does work like that, it's for just a minute amount of practitioners, you know. When Shakyamuni Buddha, historically, the way they tell the story, Shakyamuni Buddha was our historical Buddha who lived approximately 2,600 years ago. When they talk about his path, from when he was like us to when he attained enlightenment, took three countless great eons, which is, it gives you a heart attack when you start. If you look up what's an eon, how long is an eon? Anyone remember the numbers? Well, one way to describe it is the cycle of when a sun comes into existence, abides, dies, and then a new one comes back, however long that is, trillions of years. That's one regular eon, not a great eon. Okay, so he had three of those before. From when, what this means is not from when he was born or when he came into existence, because we feel that the mind is beginningless. It was when his mind turned to the path. When the mind turns to the path, we might get distracted, we might, go off on tangents, but you never really come off the path. I mean, you are going to attain enlightenment, but there's a lot of diversions, and it takes for him three countless great eons. So that's a long time. We don't know where are we at? Are we in one of those eons? We're in the second one? No, we're not. Most of not in the second one, but it's a long, steady path, and it can be quicker than that too. When I talk about the mind, I'm not just talking about my mind, my trip. I'm talking about the mind of each and every universal living being. So, what we're talking about also, this for people if maybe they don't know. So, what distinguishes a living being is having a mind. So, we believe that all humans have a mind. All ants have a mind. All fish have a mind. All birds have a mind. All insects have a mind. So this is what we call a living being or a sentient being. And every sentient being possesses a mind. And it's their own individual mind. So from when we or an insect or an animal or a spirit, and then we become a person, and then become maybe an angel or a god or whatever. That's all our individual mind. It's not my mind's not your mind. We don't switch. Okay, it's very individual. It's completely individual. Okay, so why Buddhists don't kill, for example, is because each mind has, for the most part, minds are very similar in the sense that they experience pain and equally, that we all experience pain. We all experience our own joy and happiness. We all experience our own neurosis. And so um, just like as if I were to cause you pain, your experience is the same as mine. So it's like, well, why would I do that? Right? And so what extends what's hard is when we start looking at animals, they have the same thing. They have a mind and they have experience. The thing about a mind is that it experiences. So when we talk about the mind possessed, there's a self, right? Like I'm not you and you're not me. There's some difference, right? And we could say, well, that's myself and that's yourself. Well, eventually someday we have to define that. What that means is sort of the core idea in Buddhist thought of what that self is. Because There's something going on that I experience that you don't. And there's something you experience that I don't. What is that? When someone like Lama Yeshe, so the primary focus in Buddhist therapy is to understand the nature of this self. So the nature of the self, because we don't understand the nature of the self, we're very confused and set up forever to misbehave and misperceive. So the core obstacle or the core enemy is this sense of self. It's not the self itself. It's not the self. It's the idea and the perception, the belief that the self exists a certain way. And so all the Buddhist practices, what it means to be awakened is to understand the nature of the self. We could say the false self. It's the false self we believe is the true self. Okay. And and that false self is something we follow each and every instant. And it doesn't exist the way it appears. We think it's like we follow an hallucination, believe like a mirage. We keep going after the mirage, really believing there's water there. Okay, and this is the core of Buddhist practice. This is the core of Buddhist thought. They say that all the Buddha taught, every teaching that Buddha taught, from the preciousness of life to impermanence to all these hundreds of teachings was really for the sole purpose of understanding the nature of reality. And the reality that we're talking about, the reality that we are interested in discovering is the reality of this self, soul, this self, the soul, the self, okay? And the reality of objects, everything else, all other phenomena. One can extend the understanding as one develops understanding of the nature, true nature of ourself or our identity, you can extend that to other things like this cup. Okay, I don't understand the nature. When Lama said you don't even know how to make a cup of tea, it's because you don't even see the tea as it really exists. There is tea, there is a self, but the way that we relate to all of this stuff is not how they are. And it's really fascinating. I don't know in psychology, because I've been retired for a while. I don't know in psychology if that's a psychological approach to mental health. Understand the true nature of things and you'll be healthy. Do they say that? Huh? Yeah, which would get close. Yeah. But would be interesting is do they articulate, I'm not going to put you on the spot because you meant, but do they articulate what is so when you're doing diagnosis as a therapist or psychologist, um, you're diagnosing or you're rating a person's well-being based on a number of factors. One is diagnosis. But the interesting thing is it's always a negative, right? It's in comparison to what? I mean, excuse me, there are attempts to define mental well-being in psychology, but most of it is about relationships, right? And a sense of well-being in oneself. That's true. So that's good. That would be the same. So um, it's the same in Buddhist psychology. The difference is that there's a lot of analysis that goes on. Well, is that really a well-being or not? Is that lasting well-being? Maybe it's a better way to say, is it lasting well-being? And so I have a lot of hope for Western or modern psychology that is good because there's a lot of interaction now between, or it has been for some years, between modern science, modern psychology, and Buddhist science. And it's a great thing for both of them. Okay, so a living being is something that possesses a mind, so that we can agree on our definitions. And any living being has a potential to attain full happiness or full awakening. Problem is maybe not in that incarnation, not in that form. The idea of a mollusk being able to attain awakening is pretty distant. So you want to have a good equipment, which usually means a human mind and a human body. That's the best. I mean, we won't go into that, but if you start analyzing, what capacity animals have in terms of free will and generating and understanding I mean, we have to project. We're not in their minds, so it's hard to know. But seems that they're very pretty blocked, pretty limited in what they can achieve. And also in Buddhist thought and the Buddhist path, that's the other thing. It's not about. I mean, devotion's okay. It's better than not having it, but it doesn't really lead to any great achievements. Devotion alone. What does is we have a strong uh, commitment to the critical thinking as well. Not only because we can get caught up in just critical thinking, but we have to use our analytical or intellectual or critical thinking on this path because you have to analyze what you're doing because you're your own teacher. No one's going to do it for you, which is why I think people don't like Buddhist thoughts sometimes. The way we live, the way we think, everything is dedicated to material pleasure. We consider sense objects to be of the utmost importance and materialistically devote ourselves to whatever makes us happy, famous, or popular. Even though all this comes from our mind, we are so totally preoccupied by external objects that we never look within, we never look. We never question why we find them so interesting. So, again, as I often say, it's kind of a curse, these Buddhist teachings, because once you hear them, you can't unhear them, right? We try, and some of us try for years to just escape and just kind of come back because it felt so much better when I didn't have to be so honest with myself. It hurts, right? It's in your face. And it's not for everybody, in that way. Yeah, it takes courage. It doesn't it take courage when you begin to look at why, someone says like one or two words and it really hurts, the criticism, it hurts. And it's very hard to say it's not their fault. What does it say at the school? You teach them, they can't say, you made me angry. What do you teach them to say? I have anger. Yeah. I got angry. I have anger. But we always say, you made me really happy today when I saw you after all these years. Even that's not true. It'd be easier to say, oh, Namgyal really irritated me when I saw that one. But how about the happy one too? Still external object, isn't it? So in Buddhist thought, so we don't leave any stone unturned because everything becomes an object of meditation. And that first is contemplation, okay? First is the information. Someone has to tell you that it's not in the material object. Until we hear that, and most people kind of know that. But with we think of it as a spiritual path is when we take that and then work with it. That's the difference. Otherwise, it's just intellectual babble. And most, I shouldn't say for you, but that's where a lot of us are. We don't go beyond the, there's that thing about spiritual bypassing, right? Spiritual bypassing, if I understand it, is that thing, well, you know, your cabin's kind of cold in the heater and you're kind of upset about it. And what do I say? But no, it's just your karma, right? Or, you got in an accident. Oh, it's just your karma. Or no, someone cuts in front of you at the grocery store and you're getting irritated. And no, you should be thinking of others. They want to walk, they want to be, sir. Yeah, like that. And it's like, well, forget that. Okay, I will, something. But in here, nothing's happening. You're still pissed off. So the reason we have to question is it's not enough. These platitudes are not enough. We know we wake up with those what are those things called? Affirmations, right? I need to read one affirmation when I get up in the morning, like that. But does it really change us? Right? It doesn't. Why? So in learning something, in changing our in changing our makeup. Yes, we need the information. So we talk about three steps. One is traditionally called listening. Well, listening means getting the information like we're doing now. Okay. But we don't stop there. That's why so many of us are so just intellectual, and people tell you it's just your karma and all that stuff. Because you have to add the other two to it. And the other two are then contemplation, which means like mulling it over, digesting it, kind of tweaking it, seeing if it works, really understand. Like, let's just take karma. It's a very deep, deep, profound subject, which, has gotten all kinds of different interpretations in our culture. And recently, people generally don't know what they're talking about, the real sense of what karma means. Karma is very scientific in the sense because it's a very scientific theory. Um, it's not when people say karma, they're talking about fate for the most part. That's not scientific. So, so we have to contemplate. So let's say, like with Namgil here, his heater's broken. He was cold last night. I say it's his karma. That's just platitude. That's his content, right? And then he says to me, "Well, what do you mean by that?" I said, "Well, let's talk. Let's think about why would that be karma that his heater was broken, right?" So we have to go there, not just, "Oh, it's your karma." It doesn't do much, that statement. So then we start talking about, well, how can it be karma? So karma, which means cause and effect. So it's cause and effect. Well, we know that the cause, are we talking about the cause, the fact that a rat ate through the line and that's why the heater didn't work? Is that, well, that would be a cause why the heater didn't work, right? Is that karma? Not really, right? Karma is because everything the Buddha taught is psychological. It's internal. So really, when we're talking about karma with the heater, we're talking about Namgyal's experience. So he experienced irritation. Sorry, you probably didn't, but and your heater wasn't broken. But he is, you know, interpretation. His experience is karma. His karma. So he looked at this heater and he didn't have the right tools to fix it, and he got irritated. It was cold. That's karma. Because when I was there, I thought, oh, it's not that bad. It's not that cold in here, and you can put a jacket on. So we have different contemplation around working with that, right? You see what I'm saying? So that's step two. Then step three is what we call meditation. Well, meditation then is experience. So then Namgyal, I leave, and Namgyal goes to his cushion, and then he really goes into seeing the mental interaction of how, see, for him to experience irritation or discomfort, discomfort is a mental state, right? Discomfort is a mental state, and isn't it an effect? It a result? I feel discomfort. I feel irritation. Isn't that a mental effect? It's like it's something happening. It's a result, right? There's no result in this formula. There's no result, there's no effect without a cause. So he's irritated. Sorry, I mean, you're probably he's he's a long time monk. How long were you a monk? 11 years. And lived with Lama Zopa for many of those years. So I'm sure I'm just projecting onto him what I would be going through, right? So that's karma. If he's feeling discomfort and irritation, that's an effect, right? So it had to have a cause. Where's the cause? What's the cause of that discomfort? It's not in the heater, is it? Heater's neutral, huh? Heater's just, it's in the mind. That is what we talk about. What does Lama say here? We never question why we find them so interesting. Well, in this sense, so that is then the meditation. Then when he goes into he has a direct experience or some flavor of experience of these mental imprints arising and resulting in discomfort. So those are the three steps. And at that point, when he comes over to my house and my furnace is broken, he probably doesn't say something like, "Oh, it's your karma." He's probably going to help me understand, the mental interaction with all that stuff, the internal reality of it, right? You can do that, right? Okay, try it. So, when we talk, this is sort of now here we got a little traditional teaching, uh, because Lama mentioned here, but sorry, let's go back real quick. So we consider sense objects to be of the utmost importance and materialistically devote ourselves to whatever makes us happy, famous, or popular. So now, in terms of our life, what we call a living being, where we spend our time are in these eight things here. Okay, so when we take, what's another example besides a furnace going on? Does anyone have another example of some problem? Did it on the way here? My car broke down. So, which is very, yeah, that's a good. The what? And then, uh-huh. So now I have a question for you. Well, so when you're having that experience, were you experiencing pleasure? Okay. It was pain. Right. It's only a car. I get it. I'm the same. So this is where we're experience. When we're in experience, we are in experience by almost all the time with something material. When Lama says material objects, he means the sense world. So everything almost all of our experience is through our five senses, and we have a mental sense. So the mental sense is the one when we experience our world like in dreams, right? Or daydreaming, or if I say to you, visualize your childhood room. That's the mental sense and mental. So just to make sure that that's functioning too. It's not just all five senses, but the five senses only perceive material objects. That means atomic, molecular forms. It's interesting, right? And so we spend all of our reality, all of our time engaged with material objects, except for when we're doing the mental stuff, you know, dreaming or like those things. Like fear, when you're really afraid that something's happening, some event, and so you go, oh my God, this is gonna like that. That's the mental sense and the mental experience. Okay. So since we're always engaging with material objects, we're in reaction. We're not proactive, we're reactive. So our whole life is spent in reaction, right? So in this context of Buddhist thought, awakening is considered freedom, and we're not free because we're always in reaction. So there's some point when you will have an experience of your car breaking down, and you'll have a different experience because you'll be developing these qualities that we have inside of us. Because we don't just have all the bad stuff, we have the good stuff. But unfortunately, the good stuff is suppressed by the habitual misunderstanding stuff, like ignorance and anger and jealousy and envy and frustration and irritation and attachment and desire. Those are all distracting us from our compassion, our love, our non-harmfulness, our equanimity. We have positive qualities. And some people, their positive qualities come out more than others because they don't have the negative, we call them afflictions or mental disorders, are not as dominant. We see all kinds of people have different levels of you know engagement with these negative afflictions, which I'm not going to go into, but we have a complete map of all of that. And that's when we get in the study, and that's when people get distracted, and they talk about the 11 virtuous minds and 20 secondary afflictions and the six major afflictions and the four neutral ones. Okay, it's pretty interesting. You go and go and go, and then all of a sudden you're in this thing, and oh yeah, I'm practicing Buddhism, and then someone says, I don't like the way you park your car over the line like that. Well, get another parking spot. You don't have to park next to me. So, so we begin so in terms of mental health, which is the goal of Buddhist practice, is we're looking at a state of mind or a state of being that is balanced, e- equanimous, it's compassionate, it's considering of others, it's less self-absorption and self-focus. Why? Because those things make me unhappy, but we don't know that. So it's like, this is what is happening, unfortunately, in our culture and in some of the Western therapeutic approaches is, and they're not all wrong. When I say this stuff, it's more, I don't want to be sort of provocative as well. Okay, so it's not, I'm saying this is inherently true, but it's like, I need to take time for myself. All these things about self-care, self-compassion. You got to be careful. Some are good. It depends on the motivation, right? Yeah, depends on the motivation. Um, but a lot of that is being presented as sort of as cures. So there's a trend in belief in what makes us happy as a culture. A lot more, and we have to be. That's where we need to be really careful about that because that comes from a philosophy. The philosophy being that take care of number one. And I know I'm being a little bit exaggerating, but take care of number one can be a philosophy. Generally, that's the American philosophy, but it's not. It's just a materialistic philosophy. But so we're constantly engaged with objects. So what that means is that I react, I don't proact. And practicing a spiritual or psychological path means you're proactive. So it means that when, because you practice, no one likes their car breaking down, okay, but begin to develop a different experience because the experience changes first by understanding that I'm just in reaction to something that doesn't exist. Because your car breaking down like that, and you felt suffering or pain or, whereas the pain is not in the car. The car is just a bunch of pieces. It's just a collection of atoms and molecules, isn't it? So and we start swearing at our car for being the cause of all the problems. That's what we do. Buddhism saying, or Buddhist psychology, or this path away, is saying that is a setup because that's not the way it is. There is no pain or suffering in. Can you find it in the parts of your car? Yeah. So what that means is that in terms of these eight worldly concerns or these eight trivial pursuits, is that we're deluded. Right? And we do that all day long. I'm deluded into thinking my car is making me suffer. We all do the same thing, by the way, but that's a pretty good example. It's a simple, and also it works at a very micro level. You go over to the little cafe and you want to get a coffee and they don't have any sweetener. Same thing happens. Pleasure, pain, right? And you have that kind of thing. That's pain. So we could use the word discomfort, irritation. That is always happening every instant. It's either comfort or discomfort. There is neutral too, but it doesn't stay neutral very long. Okay? Based upon a wrong perception of what makes me happy. More sweetener will make me happy. That's my belief system. We do that about everything, every instant. Then there's gain and loss. So that just has to do with, gain and loss. So we're very focused on gaining and very focused on uh, um, preventing loss. No one likes loss. So if we spend our life's motivation on working with gain and loss in the sense of maybe generating wealth, right, as a gain, getting more and more properties because you had one property, you did pretty good with that one, and then maybe so it's this gain, this sense of gain, which we have no control over. This is what's interesting because many people do the same thing, that We follow exactly the same formula. You and I follow the same. We're going to do real estate. We follow the same formula. We went to the same training program. We're in the same demographic. We're in the same. You make a lot of money, and I keep losing houses. Why? Why is that? Because we think the external thing. If we just do this training program, I'll be successful. I'll be making $40,000 more a year. And it doesn't happen. Why? So gain and loss. There's always that sense of loss. There's always, even with people, you know, everyone here, if we're close and I'm the last one to live, then I'm going to lose all of you. Or if I'm not the last one to live, I'm going to lose you too. I'm going to lose you then when I die. I'm losing you. I'm going to have that sense of loss. And then just even going, yeah, anyway. So then praise and blame, these are big ones, you know. Um, so this is what we spend our life doing. The point is, this is our life. I want to, I want to generate more pleasure and extend it. Okay. Um, get more television channels. Uh, find better uh, recreational drugs that last longer. I don't crash as quickly. Maybe if you drink, drink slow or drink something, you know, all these things is to extend pleasure, right? And avoid pain. That's what we spend when we're sitting here. Some of us are sitting like this, but we're going to move at a certain point, right? And you're going to stretch. What is that? So Lama Yeshe's emphasis is examine, 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 examine. That he feels is meditation. That he feels is a spiritual path. Spiritual meaning accessing our deepest potential. The Buddhist path, and particularly how Lama Yeshe would describe it, is he's going to talk about he used to talk about attaining universal happiness, universal wisdom, universal happiness. And that is something that we possess. It's just undeveloped. Okay, the potential's there. And these are the distractions. So we think that the meaning of life, and I'm generalizing, is going to be one of these eight things, or these four things. And we really do all of them, but I think some people have an emphasis on one or the other. Some people have a very strong drive for achievement of a career or wealth. We could say, well, that might be more. You could be fame and disgrace, celebrities. I'm generalizing. Politicians. What drives them? Certainly not pleasure and pain in this sense. It's the pleasure of power. It's the pleasure of fame. I'm generalizing again. But we have to. So people, I think, have personalities that gravitate maybe more towards one than the other. But we do all four of them all the time. It's like, yeah, it's like making a mistake at work. Some people it's not so bad. Some people it's terrible. You know, because of an adherence developed. It's a pattern. It's a habit. It's how what makes me happy is doing flawless, mistake-free work where I don't upset anybody. Anybody have that? I mean, I think it's hard. I think I have on my email at the bottom, Lama. Yeah, so I'll tell you a story. So um, one of my jobs. So every job that Lama Yeshe gave me, I failed at. I think that's why he gave them to me. You know, I shouldn't say everyone, but I think most everyone. He set me up every time. And so one of the jobs he asked me to do, you have to remember, this is very third world, late 70s, early 80s. And Nepal was, very, in that context, very third world. I don't want to say primitive, that's kind of derogatory. But, in the beginning, we didn't have electricity and we didn't have running water and we didn't have heat and those kinds of things, no phones. Uh, I don't know how my parents, I don't know what they were thinking. I was in Nepal, it's like, we had aerograms. Anyone know what an aerogram is? No? I'm that old. Aerograms, you go down to the poste restante. the post office, and you buy these pre-printed piece of paper that had a stamp on them, and you wrote in them, and then it had little glue, and you folded it a certain way, and it became a letter, and that was an aerogram. So we had aerograms, and you send them, and then they get it like 2 weeks later. And then I think I called them on the phone two or three times, twice, maybe once or twice, because you have to go down to the central telegraph office, give the operator who's behind some window there your phone number. Does anyone know this? Anyone ever do anything like that? Everyone shakes their heads, showing my age. No, it's just the country, right? And and then you give the phone number, and then they say, okay, take a seat. And there's all these people in there, and you're sitting there for a really long time, a couple hours, and then finally you hear they yell out from way, Karuna, Karuna, number three, and you go running into this little booth, so you can have this private conversation. The booth had no ceiling on it. So everyone's in there, hi mom, and everyone's talking, they're just shouting thing. You're trying to have this conversation. Send money, send money. It's like, and then click, cut off. So then they say, okay, we'll have to reconnect you. And you go back and you sit for another hour. And meanwhile, it's 2 in the morning here, and they route it through Hong Kong. Why am I telling this story? Can you please remind me why I'm telling it? Lama Yeshe. So, so he, so our monastery, Kopan, we had always like 85 little monks. And he asked me, please, I want you to get the monastery registered. That means legal. But it was, I don't know, that's not an oxymoron, it's a contradiction. Because we were Tibetan, we weren't only Tibetan, we were also Sherpa. We had a lot of Nepali monks of Tibetan, what do you call it, culture, language. Sherpa language is similar to Tibetan. Anyway, they're Tibetan race, but they were geographically in Nepal. And we also had Tibetans, refugees. Well, the thing is, they wouldn't want the monastery to be registered and legal because then that gives you legal rights. And Nepal being very, very sensitive to China, and China is very anti-Tibetan, right? So he's asking me to get it recognized legally, which was like asking the Chinese to recognize this monastery as a legal entity. So I worked with this because I speak Nepalese, would go in and out of these, and I had a non-tourist visa, which was also rare. So I was given these kind of jobs, and so I was working with a Nepali gopher. And how do you get something like that done in Nepal? There's a fee. We'll leave it at that. So finally, after I think it took about a year, finally organized, I was going to meet with the education minister, right? And with my go-between guy. And so I go down there and, what's the fee, right? And the fee was a lot. And the monastery was not wealthy at all. And so I took this, I remember, I think it was like 5,000 rupees or something. And I took it to my my agent. And we decided we're gonna, I'll meet you down here, not far from the monastery. It's about 20-minute walk. I'll meet you here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and we'll go see the minister together. And I gave him the money because as a sign of, I don't know, when you pay a bribe, I'll teach you how to do it. You don't give the bribe directly to someone's hand, okay? It's all kind of these protocol around it because he has to save face, right? He's not corrupt. This is an education minister. That's fair enough. And so I gave him the money that night. My agent is to give to the minister when we go together. And we go together and have a cup of tea with the minister, and then whatever my agent would give the bakshish at some point. So the next morning I come down 9 o'clock to meet with him, right? And in Nepal, time is very amorphous. It's not linear. And he wasn't at the meeting place right then. That's very common. So I waited 15 minutes. That's okay. Half hour. It's getting like, well, appointment's supposedly 10, which can be anywhere between 10 and noon. I don't know. I think I waited 45 minutes. He wasn't there. He didn't come. So I knew where he lived. So I walked further down the road or whatever and went to his house. And his house was all kind of boarded up. All the shutters were closed. It was closed. And I saw his next door neighbor and I said, where's Rudra? And he said, oh, Rudra Baguio. Baguio means fled, ran away, left. He's telling me, yeah, he has his two kids, his wife. They packed everything up last night and left. I said, where'd they go? He said, I don't know. They moved, along with my bakshish. So the walk from there to Kopan was maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes up this hill. And I just kept walking and see the monastery up there. And I'm thinking, it felt like 3 days because I knew Lama was waiting for me up there, who was always wrathful with me. So I was always nervous anyway, even though I was going to have a cup of tea. So I trudge up to go, I go up the stairs. I go up to where the patio, where his room, the Lamas live up there. And it just so happens, he's outside on the patio watering flowers. I mean, I think he's, completely pretending. So he looks at me and goes, so what happened? And I told him. And he only said two things. He said, you should know better how Nepalese people are, which was true. And then he then said, anyway, it's my students who don't make any mistakes that I keep my eye on because I know they're not doing anything. And he walked away. I never heard about it again. It's my students who don't make any mistakes I keep my eye on because I know they're not doing anything. Better to try and get criticized and lose 5,000 rupees. Okay, by grasping for the pleasant and avoiding the unpleasant, we remain stuck in cycles of desire and aversion. Okay, stop. Desire and aversion. Desire, this we spend our whole day doing. As long as we exist, our mind is an inseparable part of us. I'm going to read this so you get some content. As a result, we're always up and down. It's not our body that goes up and down, it's our mind. The body does go up and down, of course, but really, what makes the body going up and down a problem or not is our mind, isn't it? You know, the mind whose way of functioning we do not understand. Therefore, sometimes we have to examine ourselves, not just our body, but our mind. After all, it is our mind that is always telling us what to do. We have to know our own psychology, or in religious terminology, perhaps our inner nature. Anyway, no matter what we call it, we have to know our own mind. So this is the essence of Buddhist approach. It's about the mind. It's about knowing the mind, okay? So it's not about knowing God. It's not about knowing Buddha. It's not about knowing the pure realms. It's not about knowing karma even. Only in relationship to our own mind, which is non-religious, right? It's non-religious. Oops. You have to know our own mind. How can you separate your body or your self-image from your mind? It's not possible. So there's never going to be a time when our body and self-image, our mind are going to be separate from a body. They're not going to be separated. I mean, at time of death, yes, the mind does temporarily separate from a body, a gross body. You think you're an independent person, free to travel the world, enjoy everything. Despite what you think, you are not free. I'm not saying you're under the control of someone else. People are, of course, but it's your own uncontrolled mind, your own attachment that oppresses you. And I know that people who have illnesses and physical problems or poverty, these things, we have to be very sympathetic, empathetic. It's not like, oh, it's all in your mind. It's really, actually, it's quite abusive to say that to people, you know. But for the practitioner, right, whose goal is to attain happiness, ultimate happiness, then in a way, you have to remind them, you know, you have to remind them. It is oppressive to be sick. It is oppressive to be poor. It is oppressive to be cold. It is oppressive to not have material things. It is. And we're not saying, not to have those things. You do need your health as best as we can do it. We do need resources. We do need a peaceful place to live. I mean, I can you imagine living in Iran right now. I mean, I wouldn't choose that. Okay, maybe a high practitioner might choose it, by the way. That's possible. But we have to be realistic in this sense. But in terms of happiness, if in terms of our spiritual well-being, our mental well-being, that is something we can only do in the context of our mind. We can't keep fiddling with our resources and our body and our job. If we keep thinking that, I have to live in California as opposed to, someplace that's not easy to live in, and so I need to get a good job, I need to make more money, and then you spend 8, 10, 12, 15 years, and you might not achieve it. That's kind of our approach to life, and that's where Lama Yeshe would say that's not realistic. It's not realistic because it's not healthy. And and also when we get to a certain point, Lama Yeshe had manifested some really severe illness. He had a bad heart. But I never saw him suffer. Yes, he had to lie down, he couldn't breathe, you know. Uh, I had the great, I guess you call fortune of caring for him for the 2 months before he passed away. He was very, very, very ill with his heart. And we were in seclusion in New Delhi. He didn't want anyone to know where we were or where he was. And there were just two Sherpa monks with and myself. And then Lama's Rinpoche came for the second month. But um, he was, really, they said that his heart was twice the size of a normal heart. He had blocked valves or something. I'm not sure what. And so I knew before so we went from Kopan where he fell ill to Delhi to try and go to the hospital and kind of get treatment. But before we left, I knew he was very ill. But he wanted to go give a final lecture or talk, teaching to the November course group I was telling you about. Teaching. He usually was very, very punctual. He would only teach for a very short, 2 hours or an hour and a half. Lama Zopa might go for 8. And he was so he's teaching. He taught for 2 hours on the awakening mind of compassion, bodhicitta. Compassion, compassion, compassion. And yes, I'm looking at him. There's a picture. I have a picture of that. I'm sitting below, and I'm just, no, he's not well. How is he doing this? And then he did something strange. After about 2 hours, he said, "Okay, let's take a pee-pee break," which means he's going to continue. And so and I stood up and I said, "Lama, I think better to stop." He looked at me and said, "Sit down and shut up." He knew it was his last talk that he gave. So sit down and shut up. No, you sit down and shut up. Knowing your own mind is a solution to all your problems. If you discover how you oppress yourself, your uncontrolled mind will disappear. Who knows this movie? You do? My favorite movie. Mary said, vote for Pedro and all your problems will disappear. One day the world looks so beautiful, the next day it looks terrible. How can you say that? He says. Scientifically, it's impossible. Well, that should be It's impossible that the world can change so radically. It's your mind that causes appearances. Wow, that's pretty. It's your mind that causes appearances. If we knew that, we'd be happy. Because if I knew that the broken heater was merely an appearance, I'd have a different relationship with that experience, right? If I knew my car that's broken down is in a mere appearance. What does it mean, mere appearance? What do we see instead? What do we see instead of an appearance? We see it's a solid, unchanging, permanent, independent reality when it doesn't exist that way. And this, we're going to the other side. We're not going to spend time too much here, but appearance, an appearance. I don't think you're an appearance. I think you're there. An appearance means like a hallucination or a dream, right? So in Buddhist psychology, everything is an appearance. And in Buddhist psychology, the way that problems arise, which are all the time, is that we believe that what's appearing is not an appearance. It exists the way it appears. And there's what we spend time examining the mind, examining reality is how does this cup really it it appears solid, independent, right? Over there. This cup is over here, isn't it? And this cup exists there, right? That means it exists independently. Is that a problem? Does that make sense? Everything you're looking at, hearing, smelling, tasting appears independent. It really exists over there. You really are that guy. Okay. But if you begin to deconstruct it from the point of view of reality, even scientifically, uh, you appear to me as solid and independent, right? As an entity, one single entity. Is there is there any singularity to him? Is there any singularity? Is there any monolithic thing there without parts? Is that one thing or many things? Countless. Do you see that? I don't. So if I relate everyone here, if I relate to everyone as existing inherently or individually or independently or partlessly, isn't that a wrong? Aren't I seeing something that's not real? Your car, you see that way, you see it as not real. If you see your car at the time of the breakdown, and it's not just your car, right? It's also you, your thoughts, the highway. If you saw them as they existed, how would you see it? Maybe that's too big a question, but think about it. How would we see something if we saw it as it really was? Anybody online have a reply, Diane? No. As atoms floating around in space and molecules, hmm? Parts. That's just one part of it. Hmm? And how can you have a realistic reaction to the car breaking down? One way, not only is the car not, it's just a bunch of parts. It's other things too, by the way. There's other things going on deeper. But if we just go to the part of parts, and the other thing about your car, right, is it's moving instant to instant, isn't it? Its parts are like the molecules and atoms are flying around, right? But we see it as permanent and fixed, don't we? What if you saw your car at that time? You can imagine during like 5 minutes before your car broke down, up to when your car broke down, and after when your car broke down, if you just saw it as a flow as opposed to fixed. We see things fixed, but it doesn't exist that way, does it? Is there anything in that experience that's not moving? The space, but the space is not what we're perceiving. We're just perceiving. Interesting about space, yes. Space doesn't move, but space is one of the few things that doesn't move, that's permanent. But that's not our perception. We're not perceiving the space. We're perceiving the impermanent phenomena. We're just seeing a phenomena, it's called, right? Is there anything in that phenomena that is not moving? And when I say moving, if it's moving moment to moment, it implies it's moving second to second. And if it's moving second to second, it can only move second to second if it's moving nanosecond to nanosecond, and then ad infinitum. Is there anything in that that's fixed? Your perception is fixed, but it's wrong, right? And what I'm saying is, So Lama Yeshe, the Dalai Lama, they don't see it that way. They see all that movement and other things because they see reality. This is just a gross sense of reality. There's more subtle. The other thing that's moving instant to instant is you. But you think, and me, think we're fixed. I'm so pissed off with this car. I'm that I is as fixed and permanent sense as we see the car. It's equal. So all of that, which is in the state, which is in the nature of movement, we see as fixed. So the subject is moving, the object is moving. I see the subject is fixed. I'm so pissed off with this car. And where's AAA anyway? Right? That sense of I, fixed, solid, independent, permanent, unmoving. The car, all that steel, all that, the hoses, all that stuff, the pavement, even the cars going by, we see as fixed. We don't see them as moving. Okay, yeah, they're moving. Yeah, first you and no idea. The question was, well, you could answer. Is this related to our pineal gland being crystallized? Oh, I see. If it is crystallized or if it isn't crystallized. Decalcified, we'd see with the third eye. I don't know. But of course, physically, everything's related. Yeah. Yeah. That's what we would say. We would say the brain or the mind, which are not the same. Yeah. Do you know about that? Pineal gland? No. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. S- So let me just repeat because we're supposed. Do you have the microphone? Yeah. And then we have. It is midday, but I talk too much, so I don't leave enough time. I'm gonna have you just repeat it, but in I got it, but for the people online, just a real short version.
When my car breaks down, I couldn't care less about the physical parts of the car. I care about my car as a vessel getting me from place to place in my travel through time. And when my car breaks down, it prevents me from perhaps meeting a friend, attending an event, making a connection,
Right.
or maybe it creates suffering, financial suffering. It means that
Hmm.
I have to work harder or lose
Hmm.
some other material thing. And so
Right.
I am grappling with the loss of that ripple effect created by the car, not
Hmm.
the car itself.
So just to if you come next week, we can go more into it, okay? But what I'm gonna say, so so it doesn't matter so much, uh, because what you're relating to is the physical object has less of an impact on you, is what you're saying, in terms. What has the impact on you is what the other things that are important for you and me, which is your relationship with the person you're going to see and um, those sort of more human kind of reactions, more. But the thing is, whatever is happening, the mind is perceiving things incorrectly. So, for me, I'm hung up on my car, but I could be hung up on the fact that I'm not going to see my friend. I get that, because we have different values. So some people are habituated. It's like people who are into racing cars. That one I never quite understood. I mean, I kind of get it, but it's not my focus at all. Mine might be golf, you know. So that part doesn't really matter. It does matter, of course, because depending on how much I invest in it, that's the level of reaction I'm going to have when I don't get it. So yours is not so much about the car, but not getting the connection with your friend. You know, but the point is, you still can use that. So then your friend, I'm extrapolating, right? But your friend is still seen incorrectly. Just the way I see the car, I'm seeing my friend that way. And subject. We have to throw in the subject. The subject, the one who's upset because I'm going to be late for my friend or whatever. Um, that subject is still the same subject we're talking about, the guy who's upset with the car, this car breaking down. That subject, me, I still see also as permanent when I'm in the state of change, actually. You know, when you just start looking at your mind, you see that it's changing instant to instant all the time. So we have a sense that I am this. Okay, I'm Karuna teaching, I'm father, right? That I is the same misconception as the way I see the car. So you're just not seeing it with the car. That's good. But it doesn't mean and that's good. I mean, that's a healthier mind. But liberation would be also we have to identify the misperception of a sense of self. Doesn't mean self doesn't exist. Doesn't mean we don't exist. We don't exist the way we appear. When we exist the way when we exist, when we appear really, that's the awakened mind. That's the Buddha. Then our Buddha nature is our becomes our self. But right now, that Buddha nature is undeveloped because it's obscured and distracted by all this other misperception. I think I went over time. We didn't even do any meditation. I'm really. Any other question? Anything online? No. Okay. See you next week. And if questions, I like questions, so please bring them, and it also stops me from talking too much. Although you ask a question, I talk more, so I don't know. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Have a great Saturday, weekend, week, life. Okay. Thank you online also. Thank you. Thank you.